What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Let's talk about it. On this channel, I talk about court corruption, police brutality, and more. I speak from my own personal experience and I back everything up with evidence and facts. If this is the content you like or you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. This video, do filing complaints with the Canadian Judicial Council work? It's been in the works for a while. I have dealt with the Canadian Judicial Council for 3 complaints against 3 judges who have been caught red-handed in major misconduct, judicial abuse, judicial misconduct, and my complaints got dismissed along with every other complaint that was filed with the Canadian Judicial Council in 2024. So do filing complaints with the Canadian Judicial Council work? And the short answer is no, they do not work. You have these screening officers that is near impossible to get past. They put up these unnecessary barriers, and you'll see in their responses are bogus. And this is a major live issue that not enough of us Canadians are talking about, and we need to talk about it. So on this channel, let's talk about it. We're going to dive into whether filing complaints with the Canadian Judicial Council work or not. And like I said, the short answer is no. You just look at the Canadian Judicial Council's 2024 annual report. You look at their complaints, you look at their numbers, and it's obvious. There's an obvious pattern of biasness. These screening officers are corrupted. There's this element that there's this judicial abuse. And the only body in Canada that handles complaints against the judges is the Canadian Judicial Council. So I'm looking at their annual report, and when they break it down, it says complaints carried over for 2023 was 229. Complaints filed that were open and sent to a screening officer were 985. Complaints dismissed by a screening officer, 955. Complaints dismissed by a reviewing member, 110. Complaints that were referred to paragraphs 102A to G in the Judges Act were 3, and basically they were just given a warning. So for a total of 1,068 complaints were closed. So that just tells you right there. I could just stop the video right now. Filing complaints with the Canadian Judicial Council do not work. And those 3 warnings that were given out, there was 3 judges last year, 2 of them for sure, they resigned. And it seems to me when I'm reading the literature on the Canadian Judicial Council's website, they pretty much only take complaints seriously if it's like a sexual misconduct. Like inappropriate. There was a judge last year, I believe he was up in Brampton or it was in that region. You can see it online. He was inappropriate with the court staff. Invited her out to dinner. They had wine. She had filed a complaint against them. And eventually, I believe this judge is either being disciplined or he just resigned. There was no accountability. I myself have dealt with judicial abuse and judicial misconduct, all stemming from the Kitchener-Waterloo Courthouse. I filed 3 complaints. They were clear as day that it was a perfect example of judicial abuse. Let's not forget, I was unlawfully dragged to family court for 3 years on a restraining order application never signed, with a woman I was never married with, had children with, or lived with, no domestic violence, no police history. I was renting the basement of an ex-girlfriend who admitted to the police I was a tenant at that time. We weren't dating. She was accepting money for rent, and she applied to the landlord-tenant board for an eviction application. She withheld that eviction application. She withheld these police reports weeks up until this rigged family court trial, which that trial judge reviewed and ignored. I filed 3 complaints, all dismissed with bogus responses. Justice Martha Ann Tweedy, Justice Michael Gibson, and Justice Katrina Braid bent and broke the law so bad, a true impartial person without hesitation would have sent all 3 of these judges to the Canadian Judicial Council. You go on their website, the Canadian Judicial Council's website, and underneath what we do, judicial conduct, irreproachable behavior. A fundamental element in our justice system is that good conduct of our judges. They work every day to protect and enhance our trust by adapting irreproachable behavior. The Council is committed to ensuring that this happens and does everything possible to ensure that Canadians know their judges are highly qualified, professional, and unattached by outside influence. That's not true. That is far from the truth. And if it is, the Canadian Judicial Council refused to apply what they're supposed to stand for in my situation. And I'm going to get in all the examples of the judges. I'm going to get into the complaints, the correspondence, and just, you know, it's unacceptable how these screening officers are handling complaints. And I think the public would agree with me, and especially those who have filed complaints against judges' misconduct, judicial abuse. Judicial misconduct. They have 3 paragraphs, and I'm just going to go down to the third one here. Conversely, a judge who has rendered a correct decision may engage in a conduct unworthy of his or her profession, which they never did in mine. It was never a correct decision. If you believe that, regardless of the judge's decision, their conduct or attitude was significantly questionable, the council may receive your complaint and address it. No, they didn't. They did not address anything. They just protected these screening officers, Robin MacKay and whoever OL is. They protected these judges, and they should not even be employed with the Canadian Judicial Council. And again, I'm going to be getting into examples of everything, you know, that these judges did wrong, and their misconduct, their abuse. The ethical principles for judges. So this is a pamphlet. This is like a huge little booklet. And I've already gone through this, and I've combed through this, and I've given dozens and dozens of examples, or at least dozens of examples of each judge that has not abided by these standards. The first one is judicial independence. Second is integrity and respect. Third is diligence and competence. Fourth is equality, and 5 is impartiality. These judges never abided by these, in my case. Just to, you know, in my situation, Justice Martha Ann Tweedy stepped out of her role of an impartial judge, and she filled out my ex's. The lawyer never did his job. This John David Ekping Young. Rule 17, Subrule 11 of the Family Law states, parties, not a judge, must fill out, serve, and file a trial schedule endorsement form before any trial is scheduled. That was never done. Justice Tweedy did it. Ekping Young never even filed this form with the court. The trial coordinator scheduled the trial. Justice Tweedy blocked out nearly 2 pages of transcripts covering up a major misconduct. And wait till I get into the response from this Robin MacKay, and absolutely how ridiculous his responses were. He handled 2 complaints. Justice Gibson, local senior judge, straight up lied in his endorsement. He did. He didn't like me. He heard an audio recording from me, a partial recording, and I wrote him a letter. He did not like me. There was nothing against the law. He tried to say that we lived together, we cohabitate, we were espoused. No, we were not. We were none of these things. Justice Gibson straight up lied on his endorsement, and every other person after him that I went before a judge, they were too scared to overstep his endorsement. And that's just the truth of the situation. Justice Gibson said on his endorsement, which can be seen on Canley, Family Court Case FC-22-109, that I called the applicant, I emailed her, I was not a tenant, and I breached my temporary restraining order. None of these things happened. Never called her. She provided phony, harassing, private phone calls from one day. I provided my phone call history. I never called her. She admitted at the trial. She didn't answer those calls. I never emailed her. She emailed herself. This was an exhibit. If you look at that email, you will see she took a part of an email that I had wrote to her lawyer, Ekping Young. She had copied and pasted it, and she sent it to her one email to her next email. I never emailed her. He said I breached my temporary restraining order. No, I didn't. I served her small claim court forms within the court. That is not a breach. I was never warned. I was never charged. And then he says I wasn't a tenant. When she admitted to the Waterloo Region Police, I was renting her basement. I was paying rent. She applied to the Landlord Tenant Board for an eviction application. This judge seen that police report. This judge then went on his endorsement, called me a common law spouse, never lived together at any time, which is the minimum 3 years to be considered common law. We were never a spouse, which the legal term spouse is marriage. This judge ran me down, calling me rigorous, scorched earth litigant, hominis attacks, doing all these things that I never did. And all this should have never happened because I was unlawfully dragged to family court. And it really blows my mind that these investigative journalists, these auditors, these police brutality, these corruption individuals out there, YouTube channel journalists, nothing like it blows my mind that nobody wants to talk about this. It's hard enough for me to do these videos and go public, but the fact that I'm lacking the support behind this stuff it makes it even more difficult and challenging. And then there's Justice Braid, who went behind my back and deleted and altered her 10-page endorsement down to 1. That is straight up forgery. That is deleting and altering a government document. And then you got this person from this OL, whoever this person OL is, turned my complaint around on me and called me vexatious. There's this, you see, they're trying to label me this vexatious. They already did against 2 people. They asked for 1 person, and then Justice Ian Smith went above and beyond and added Ekping Young so he could avoid his assessment, my assessment hearing, where he owes me for the damages he caused, his client caused. So this is the crap I'm talking about. You give this information about these judges' misconduct and abuse, and the only body that can properly deal with it, they just ignore the rules and the laws, and they support this type of behavior. So that's kind of what my complaints were. And they didn't abide by this literature set out by the Canadian Judicial Council. So then you go to, they keep referencing the Judges Act, right? You go to the Judges Act, Section 58, Part 2 is the Canadian Judicial Council. They have their section under 58. And then you go to Part 4, which is Section 88. You got the complaint conduct review process. And then you've got this Section 90. You got the screening officer. So under the Judges Act, they have Section 90 is the screening officer. And I want to read this to you guys because this is important. Dismissal of a complaint under the screening officer section. 91. Subject to subsection 2, a screening officer may dismiss a complaint if they are of the opinion that it, A, is frivolous, vexatious, or made for an improper purpose, or is an abuse of process. B, was not made for a reason referred to paragraph 80, A to D, or C, does not meet the screening criteria specified by the council. So B, it says go to section 80, A to B. 80. For the purposes of this division, the removal from office of a judge is justified only if any of the following reasons: the judge's continuation in office would undermine public confidence, impartiality, integrity, or independence of a judge or their office to such an extent that it would render the judge incapable of executing the functions of judicial office. A, infirmity. B, misconduct. C, failure in due execution of judicial office. D, the judge is in a position that a reasonable, fair-minded, informed observer were considered to be incapable of due execution of the judicial office. So you know, this is just straight up judicial abuse, judicial misconduct, what I went through this Kitchener-Waterloo courthouse. And that's why I'm doing this video, and that's why I've done the other videos. The public does not have confidence in the Canadian Judicial Council, and that's just facts. You go ask 100 people who filed complaints with the Canadian Judicial Council, I can guarantee you not one person will say they have any confidence in these screening officers. The thing is this, the Canadian Judicial Council has this system. They have their screening officers in place. These unnecessary, biased barriers. You know, you look at my complaints for a perfect example. Judges deleting endorsements, altering endorsements, blocking endorsements, straight up lying on endorsements, and I have all the evidence and proof, and the Canadian Judicial Council refuses to do anything about it. On their website, the Canadian Judicial Council, about our mission, our mission. And I want to read this to you guys. It says, promote the ongoing training of judges. Canadians expect their judges to be educated, impartial, empathetic, and honest, which they were never with me. They were the complete opposite. The council, in order to maintain the high standards, the council and its partners, other judges, a number of various courses. The training program is reevaluated annually so that all judges can choose what will be most useful to them to serve the public in the best possible way. And you guys look at all my cases in the Kitchener-Waterloo courthouse. Ever since that family court case got finished, you can see how they railroaded me every case. And I've put everything in my other videos, and if you guys want to check them out, I would recommend checking them out. But you can see a very full, detailed of every event of judicial abuse and judicial misconduct, even malicious prosecution dealing with that courthouse. They're protecting each other in this courthouse, and nobody should be surprised that the public is speaking up and speaking out. And to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that more people aren't speaking up. But the problem is that these public servants put fear into people, and people are scared. People are scared to speak up about this judicial abuse and these malicious prosecutions, and people shouldn't. People shouldn't have that fear in them. The first one would be under our mission, raising ever higher our rigorous ethical standards. Judges are the link between Canadians and their justice system. To earn their trust, they must adopt and maintain a high standard of conduct, both in their personal and professional lives. The council ensures that it provides judges with the tools to guide them in decision-making that are fair, unbiased, and inclusive of all of those who appear before them. This is a load of crap. These judges that I've gone before are not abiding by this. And then you got this judicial abuse that I experienced, and this is just crap. Like, it's a sham. The Canadian Judicial Council is going to say all these things, and then they're not going to enforce them. When you've got these screening officers handling complaints the way they've handling them, dismissing almost every single complaint in 2024, there is a major issue with this Canadian Judicial Council complaints program. They don't work, plain and simple. Ensure the impartiality of judges for Canadians. Every Canadian citizen must be assured that the judge who hears them will make a decision based solely on their judgment, without outside influence. This is what is known as judicial independence. Judges must be totally shielded from any improper attempt to influence their decisions. The council ensures the impartiality of judges. Straight up, that is a load of crap. You look at my cases, for example, okay? All of these judges I went before had notes about me from the previous judges. And I am convinced everything falls back to the family court trial judge, Justice Michael Gibson. You look at Justice John Krachenko, who I went before at my divisional court appeal. John David Ekping Young filed his materials pretty much a year late. Served me on New Year's, was even more late. The court staff accepted it. The judges accepted it. I went before Justice Reed to strike down their materials. He threw me out. didn't give me any cost. We get before Justice John Krachenko. He's telling me it wasn't prejudice that of how the courts handled my case. It was nothing but prejudice. Okay, and he surprisingly he was the only judge that didn't entertain a fraudulent bill. When John David Ekping-Young, I lost my motion. I was straight up illegally evicted. It's a fucking no-brainer. And the games this court played with me it's in the public's best interest to know what happened to me behind closed doors. You look at Justice Ian Smith, okay? Forced me to go to that vexatious litigant application. An application left at my door. Ekping-Young did not confirm any of his motions, which is Rule 37.10. You start a case, you have these motions, you need to confirm your attendance. If you do not do that, motions do not commence. Justice Smith ignored that. I asked Justice Smith, I needed a lawyer. I couldn't do it because my bank accounts were frozen. He went to the chambers for like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, came back and forced me to represent myself. Justice Ian Smith allowed Ekping-Young to hand me an email while I'm on the stand that I sent to the Toronto West Crown's office 9 years ago. It was never part of any affidavits. And this judge allowed it. Still to this day, nobody knows where Ekping-Young got this email. I can tell you right now, these deputy crown attorneys, Shane Hobson, Nikos, down at the West Crown's office, they called Ekping-Young. Ekping-Young admitted to them that he never requested for this document and he'd never seen it before. Yet, this was accepted as an exhibit at this vexatious litigant application. And that was absolutely bullshit, that whole case. Justice Ian Smith nodded his head at the end to my ex and the lawyer. And Ekping-Young only asked for his client to be labeled a vexatious litigant against his client. And then Justice Smith went above and beyond and labeled it against Ekping-Young as well, when it was never in any of the court filings. This is the crap I'm talking about. This is judicial abuse 101. And I need the support from the public to help get my story out, because it's in the public's best interest to know how our tax dollars are getting abused and misused and improperly allocated. Going back to our mandate, our mission, build the trust of Canadians through our transparency. The purpose of all the work of the Canadian Judicial Council is to build and maintain the confidence of Canadians in their federally appointed judges. With a strong commitment to transparency, the Council communicates, acts, proposes, discusses, and guides both the training of judges and the benchmarks that will guide them in their personal professional conduct. The Canadians do not trust the Canadian Judicial Council. You know, I can't get over how many judges in this province are letting murderers walk away, are letting people from violent robberies walk away when there's strong evidence. And then you got judges doing shit to Canadians like they're doing to me. Unlawfully dragged to family court, allowing the opposing party. This was a straight up handicap match from the beginning with my ex and her lawyer. Her lawyer didn't know what the hell he was doing half the time. This lawyer never confirmed any of his motions. All the top senior Superior Court judges in the Kitchener-Waterloo Courthouse let these proceedings proceed with that blatantly ignored the rules that a layman, a self-represented litigant, brought to their attention. You know, this is just crap, you know. There's a major issue with filing complaints with the Canadian Judicial Council. Then they have conduct of judges. The Canadian Judicial Council is the entity created by Parliament where Canadians can express their concerns about the conduct of federally appointed judges. In considering complaints, the Council may propose various measures to restore public confidence in cases. In some cases, this even may include recommendation for removal. Any Canadian can file a complaint against a federally appointed judge. Again, this is crap. They're not enforcing this. What's the point of having all this nice literature on these websites when these councils, these screening officers aren't going to abide by these rules in this literature? The public does not trust the Canadian Judicial Council, plain and simple. And I am a perfect example of that. Okay. Like I said, when you got judges conducting themselves the way they did against me, and I have all this compelling evidence, and they're going to dismiss them, wait till I get into their responses. The absolute ignorance from these screening officers is so remarkable that it's only in the public's best interest to know how they handled my complaints. I filed 3 complaints against 3 judges: Justice Martha Ann Tweedy, Justice Katrina Braid, Justice Michael Gibson. All 3 were dismissed. 2 were dismissed by Robin MacKay, Justice Tweedy and Justice Gibson. Okay? And, I've been trying to look into this Robin MacKay for years, for months. Like, who is this person? They're all in hiding. These screening officers are in hiding. Somehow today, I found Robin MacKay's information online. His Facebook, his picture, his information on LinkedIn. This is Robin MacKay is the one who dismissed 2 complaints. And the complaint against Tweedy was absolutely bullshit. When I'm going to get into one of those little sections, how stupid he was playing with me. And, going on about how he doesn't know how a judge can fill out forms if only the applicant knows the information. Well, she did do that. And she filled out the trial schedule endorsement form, and then she blocked him out and had this Robin MacKay, and had he not been so ignorant and biased, and had he forced this judge to remove what she blocked, he would have seen Robin MacKay and the Canadian Judicial Council would have exposed a major judicial misconduct and major judicial abuse that these judges engaged in. So Robin MacKay is he's a former lawyer for the military. He's a lawyer for the military there, the military police. And he also, he's a screening officer. And on LinkedIn, it says, as a screening officer at the Canadian Judicial Council, I am at the initial point of contact for complaints about federally appointed judges sent to the council. Working in both languages, I determine whether complaints merit further consideration by the council. I also work to develop council policies in wake of the recent amendments to the Judges Act. This Robin MacKay needs to be fired immediately. He is one of the biggest problems with this Canadian Judicial Council in getting complaints to the actual council. This guy needs to be removed, and he is abusing his powers by putting up unnecessary barriers. And whoever OL is dismissed my complaint against Justice Braid, who is engaged in forgery, deleting and altering an endorsement without telling anybody. This person, whoever this person is, called my complaint vexatious. That's how fucking twisted these screening officers are, and this is the crap they're getting away with. On Justice Tweedy's complaints, Robin MacKay, he said, this is how like cuckoo this Robin MacKay is. As for your allegations that the judge filled out the opposing party's trial schedule endorsement form in the only response reported trial decision I found under your name, Wibbs versus Dobson, the opposing party was represented by counsel. It would have been the responsibility of the counsel to fill out the trial schedule endorsement form. It is difficult to believe that a judge would have stepped in and taken over that role from counsel. It is especially difficult to believe because most of the information from that form requires only to have been known by the opposing party or counsel. If you are referring to such form being filled out by Justice Tweedy prior to your case conferences, it should be noted that a form is only required. It should be noted that such a form is only required before a trial to be scheduled in accordance with 17 Sub Rule 11 Ontario Family Law Rules. This is how fucking twisted this Robin MacKay is. This is how twisted Justice Tweedy is. And this is how twisted this Canadian Judicial Council is. I referenced this law with this Robin MacKay. No trial should ever be scheduled in the family court unless this form is ever filled out, served, and filed by parties, not a judge. That was never done. Justice Tweedy cowardly filled out that form and, excuse me, cowardly blocked out those transcripts because she knows I caught her in potentially the biggest judicial misconduct this courthouse has seen in that year of November of 2023. But see, this is what they do. They protect each other. This is what they do. This is how ignorant this Robin MacKay is to say these things. Yet he had this transcript blocked out. Okay? Then we go to Justice Gibson. Okay? Like I said before, this judge straight up lied in his endorsement. And everyone after him is too chicken shit to challenge his endorsement because they're scared of his credentials. The only judge sitting in the Superior Court in Ontario that has his credentials from the Canadian Armed Forces. So I guess whatever he does, say, or do is right, is correct. No, it's not. He lied and he said all these things that weren't true. And I presented these as exhibits in my family court trial. And he ignored them simply because he did not like me. And what this guy said here, Robin MacKay, again, a lawyer for the military police, Justice Gibson, in the Canadian Armed Forces, reasons that MacKay dismissed my complaint. You allege that Justice Gibson made certain errors, such as in making an endorsement entertaining fraudulent costs. However, it is not in the council to review judges' decisions, nor do they come to findings of the fact or law. Okay? This has nothing to do about the judge's decisions. It's the judge's conduct, the judge's misconduct. You have a judge who straight up lied on his endorsement. You're entertaining a fraudulent bill of cost. And when the respondent brings it to his attention, refuses to look into it. This isn't about the judge's decision. This is about judicial abuse and judicial misconduct. I'm not even going to read the rest of this. If you guys want a copy of this, you guys can let me know. Send me an email. I have no problem sharing these full endorsements, these decisions. But clearly I don't agree with them because they're crap. And that's just the truth. And then we get into Justice Braid's complaint, whoever OL is. So again, this is a judge who engaged in forgery, went behind our backs, deleted and altered a 10-page endorsement down to one, which constitutes as forgery and tampering with a government document. And mind you, this judge took 8 weeks. When I requested for these transcripts, it should take 3 days. This judge didn't want to release these transcripts because she knows what she did would have her removed from the bench if this Canadian Judicial Council actually enforced everything they stand for. And I should be sending a letter to the Chief Justice of Canada. I do not trust them. If this is how their pawns are handling information, all they're going to say is nope, and they do this every single time. Nope. Our screening officers determined there was nothing wrong, blah, 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 blah. This is what they do. I can give you guys 10 examples of this is what they did to this is what they have done to me. Conclusion. Your complaint was referred to me pursuant 89 of the Act. Pursuant to section 6.71a and subsection 6.72d of the CJC, if proceedings for the review of complaints or allegations about failure appointed judges, your complaint is dismissed that it is vexatious, an abusive process, and contains foul and aggressive language. Consequently, the council will no longer consider any further correspondence related to this matter. This just goes to show you how fucking corrupted this Canadian Judicial Council complaints process is. When you've got these people who can't even properly identify themselves and go as their initials, calling my complaint vexatious, this is how fucking backwards and retarded this complaints process is. Okay? I reached out to the Minister of Justice, Sean Fraser. He ignores me. He will not even have the decency to have a phone call with me to address this judicial abuse. What does that tell me? They are in support of this type of misconduct. If they're not going to address this, they are supporting it. Sure, the Attorney General, they send their foot soldiers out to me saying that they're not going to court, they're not going to answer my emails, they're not going to respond to my emails. Why wouldn't you? If this is a major live issue where our tax dollars are getting misused and abused, why wouldn't you take the time to speak to me? Why? Because they are protecting, aiding, and abetting this type of criminal activity. When you are blatantly abusing the rules and the laws of the courts, you shouldn't have immunity and be protected. Because if someone from the public did that, we would be charged. We would be crucified. But when you've got these public servants making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, up to $600,000 a year, and this is the crap that they're doing, the public should be very concerned. And nobody should be surprised that I'm making these videos and going public, because it seems to be the only remedy of holding those accountable who abuse their powers. I've reached out to Doug Downey, the Attorney General of Ontario. Nothing but crickets with him too. They won't talk to me. I've reached out to the Attorney General of Ontario. Same thing. They send their foot soldiers that they're not going to be looking into this. You know, when it's obvious that it's in the public's best interest to investigate this judicial abuse, this judicial misconduct. And then I've got my local MPs, Karina Gold and Natalie Pierre, who both have been absolutely useless. Karina Gold won't even talk to me because she knows this. She doesn't want to get involved with what's obvious with this judicial abuse. And then I did speak to Natalie Pierre, and she was useless. She, over the phone, she was trying to refer me to the Ontario Council and I'm like, those are not federally, that whatever complaint service, the Ontario courts, you know, these judges aren't in the Ontario courts. They're in the Superior Courts. They're federally appointed judges. So, you know, the question's obvious. Do filing complaints with the Canadian Judicial Council work? And the answer is obvious. No, they do not. Because when you've got individuals like Robin MacKay and OL, whoever that mysterious person is, giving these type of responses, it's a clear and obvious pattern that Canadians should be worried that judges can do whatever they want and there is no accountability. And yeah, it's bullshit. You know, that this is Canadians' only option. You file a complaint with the Canadian Judicial Council, you look at their annual report, they dismiss every complaint. And the judges they gave warnings to, they resigned before there was any disciplinary actions. It's a no-brainer. Complaints do not work in Ontario and in Canada. I could get into a whole video of all the complaints I've ever filed. Every single one of them has been dismissed, except one against Dr. David Evans, who improperly discharged me, that beating I took at the casino, and that officer. The College of Physicians gave him a second educational disciplinary action. This judge, that doctor kicked me out of the hospital in a blizzard, improperly discharged me. That nurse, Jennifer Stewart, the College of Nurses protected her. HPARB protected both of them. Lika, complaints don't work. Filed a complaint with the Ontario Gaming Commissions Ontario. When I had filed a complaint, they assigned Joe Phillips. When I filed a complaint against Casino Rama, they assigned Joe Phillips, who was a previous employee of Casino Rama. I filed a complaint against the hospital. Like, complaints don't work. This is what they do. So people need to be very mindful, especially filing complaints with the Canadian Judicial Council. So I'm going to leave the video with that. Thank you guys for watching. This is another video from Let's Talk About It. And do filing complaints with do filing complaints against the Canadian Judicial Council work? And the short and long answer is no. So don't bother wasting your time. Don't waste your energy, your effort. They protect one another, and that's just the reality. So thank you guys for watching. Everyone that's shown support, I appreciate it so much. And I'm going to be getting to a whole other video of just so many more topics. So stay tuned, and thank you guys for watching.